All right, it is starting up. The link is going out. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Dark Council podcast. This is the freelancer here, hosting this fine, lovely Saturday. Uh, Jake, I know you are here, but you are suffering right now.
I'm suffering bad, not gonna lie.
Yeah,
But
he
I will I
is.
will I will do my best to be here.
Yeah, he has unfortunately lost his voice in a freak shouting accident in a factory.
I Fusro Dodd too close to the sun.
Yep. Um. But anyways, he has decided that I guess we're. He has decided we've both decided we're gonna power through with this one, and hopefully by next week he will be all better. Um. We were kind of iffy if we were gonna run today, but we decided that if it got too bad, then
If
at worst, Jake just kind of goes silent for a long period of time.
if this lasts till next week, just end.
If this lasts till next week. Yeah, that's fair. Um, are you ready to discuss the oh so glorious Death Doritos?
Yes, I am hungry for information.
All right. So last week we had our first episode of this little podcast ordeal, where we discussed the Republic Commandos, and now after the reveal at the end of last episode, we will be doing the Star Destroyers, not the not just the Imperial Star Destroyer, but the Star Destroyer as a ship class in Star Wars. We will be running through pretty much every iteration of the Legends variations. Part of my reasoning for this is because the canon variations, there are some in their own, there are some in the canon variation, but there are some that I really don't care to go over. Another addendum to this is that we are not going to be giving like the full history. It is more so just here's some of the system specs of the ship. Here's what the ship looks like, and here is what the group. Here is some of the various ships that have been made that have been called Star Destroyers, as well as what the corporations who made them are. Um, so we're going to run through this in a historical format, not a release, not an order of like when they were revealed in history. We will be doing this as a release format, like when this thing appeared in the timeline, not as a release thing. Um, so for those of you uninitiated, we will be discussing some. There are starting out with this. There are 3 ships that we will be going over in the time before the Clone Wars, specifically the KOTOR era. Because as far as I'm aware, there have not been, at least from what I saw, there were not any ships that were recorded as Star Destroyer class at any point post the Old Republic eras. Starting off our little list, though, we have the Interdictor class cruiser. Not to be confused with the Immobilizer or the Interdictor Star Destroyer, we will get to those. The Interdictor class cruiser was the most common version of this one is the one famously featured in the first Knights of the Old Republic game, the Leviathan. The flagship of the Sith Lord Darth Malak, and the bigger part of it being the ship itself had a very odd shaping to it. I think of any Old Republic era ship, the Interdictor class cruiser is always going to be the weirdest ship I have ever seen. Um, I will go about finding a picture real quick for you there, Jake. I know you are probably infamously familiar with this because you, like me, have played enough KOTOR that you know what it looks like, but
Yes.
I will still provide the image so that you have the reference of what the actual descriptors of this will look like. There you go.
All right. Make sure we're talking about. Yeah. That thing's dope.
Yeah, that one has always had like the weirdest design, but it's always been the one that's like that's a very different design from what I'm used to for like a lot of Star Wars stuff. The ship itself, in a lot to run through its system specs, a loose description is provided. Um, ship is roughly about the ship is about 600 meters long and features a hull that is split into two separate structures, one dorsal and one ventral. The ship has an array of three primary ion thrusters and four auxiliary thrusters as a means of propelling the ship around, similar, in fact, to that of the later Imperial class Star Destroyer. Each ship was commanded from a sternward tower. Obviously, that is shown in the image I have provided. The big infamous command tower that Star Destroyers are very infamously utilized. I honestly, it's probably one of the big things that make Star, aside from a lot of the shapes that come out of the Star Destroyer, very like Death Dorito design that they come up with. That is one of the peak things that you can identify. That thing is a Star Destroyer.
Yep. I'm not gonna
Um,
lie. I like the Sith Star Destroyers better.
they are really cool. Um, the Interdictor class cruiser's armament equipment was established with 5 medium turbo laser cannons, 6 light point defense cannons, 3 tractor beam batteries, and count them, 4 gravity well projectors.
Hmm.
The Leviathan itself, however, was actually a modified version of this. The Leviathan was actually a modified setup that was equipped with 20 quad laser cannons, 4 turbo laser cannons, 2 ion cannons, and even a tractor beam projector. These ships were also one of the two primary craft that were produced in the Starforge that was also featured in KOTOR. The large super factory that the Sith tried to utilize. Uh, these were some of the ships that were being pumped out of it, essentially.
The Starforge, I think, is the coolest super weapon in Star Wars.
I mean, it's just a big super factory. It's not even like,
It's
here's big death laser ship.
You don't need big death laser ship. You
Just
can
make
make big
big.
death laser ship.
You don't even need to make big death laser ship. You just make endless ships.
Unlimited ship works.
Fucking god damn it. Unlimited ship works.
I am the bone of my lightsaber.
Fuck. Fuck. God damn it.
You're welcome.
Um, while never able to be confirmed or not, it is it is stated as far as the notes that the Sith warships that were produced from the Starforge actually had the capability of rivaling the ISD itself, even though they are less than half the size. I would love to have seen a matchup where that is the case, but sadly, because the Starforge does get destroyed, and these ships are just about 4,000 years old, that is unfortunately a scenario we will never get to see. So we do
Well,
move
I mean,
on.
don't say never. It could
Well,
happen.
it could happen. It's just a matter of how long does it take us to make that an Empire at War skit.
Damn, very true.
Following up that is the Centurion class battlecruiser. Now, this one did not have as clear a descriptor to it, but I'm going to run with the descriptor I have on hand. We'll also try to refer a bit to the. We'll also try to refer back to older the stats on Wikipedia, as the characteristics of this one do not actually come up as much. So the Centurion class battlecruiser, which I will provide a image for. We'll also start this one by saying that this one also is another infamous one from a KOTOR game. This is the same class of ship that the Ravager is. This is the same ship that the Ravager is. This is the same class of ship. Darth Nihilus' ship, for clarity. Let me grab that image for you. There you go. There is a
Oh, that
image.
thing looks cool too.
Yeah, that is the Centurion class battlecruiser. Another one of the originally it was a Republic ship, and then the Sith made use out of it.
I do not like the ancient B wings in that image.
Don't like the fuck, I don't even know what fighters those are.
They
I
look like old B wings.
I know they're
But
the bombers. I know they're the bombers that the Old Republic used, but I do not know what their name was. Off the top of my head, I have no idea, but that they're probably going to come up in an episode later on if we ever talk about the Old Republic arsenals. But the Centurion itself is twice as long as the Interdictor, measuring at 1,200 meters. It comes equipped with a a decently large cargo capacity and heavier firepower. The armament loadout on this thing is roughly about six medium turbo. It is six medium turbo lasers, six heavy ion batteries, six light point defense laser cannons, and three tractor beam batteries. The actual complement that this thing could support was various support vehicles, as well as 96 Sith interceptors.
that's quite a bit of that's quite a bit.
It is quite a bit. It is at least 4 squadrons worth. Its command tower was actually spacious enough. The command tower itself held a spacious quarters for the command crew, with the bridge along the sides of a concert hall. Like that is how big the bridge of the Centurion is. It is basically a concert hall,
That's dope.
which to my knowledge is probably one of the largest starship bridges ever. I think that is actually just like the largest starship bridge ever designed. But this one, obviously, its most infamous bit is that it was the ship mainly utilized by the Sith Lord Darth Nihilus. The Ravager is the most infamous iteration of this. What sucks about it is these early ones actually don't list who their original constructor, right? Who their actual constructor was. So the part of that part why I didn't mention one for the interdictor, I don't think it ever mentions the actual thing for them.
No, it was the Starforged. That's what.
Well, you have to remember the interdictor class itself was employed by the Republic beforehand. The ones made in the Starforged were all based off the Leviathan's platform, which was which in of itself was a modified variation of that cruiser. And that's the big difference going on here. Because the interdictor itself, the interdictor class cruiser was originally a Republic ship that saw action during the it was originally a prototype that they made and was later implemented to great effect by Revan when he took his fleet and took over. When he had his fall to the dark side was when that became more recognized as a Sith vessel. That is where that comes up. It does not originally. Okay, it does actually have a manufacturer. The interdictor does actually have its own manufacturer. It is the Republic Sinar Systems. So Sinar actually is the one who had some part in developing this. That oddly makes a lot of sense looking at its design now. Looking at its overall design, that makes a lot of sense that these things were yeah, the original. Okay, so the original prototype was Republic Sinar Systems, but the interdictor itself was built at the Corellian shipyards. Though we would see many more constructed by the Starforge. So that is the actual little bit of history to that cruiser. Yeah, that's a little bit of origins and explanation for that one. The Centurion itself, however, does not share much of the similar history. It really only mentions that the Ravager was Nihilus's ship. It had some time served in the Mandalorian Wars and was originally a Republic ship, much like the Leviathan, but was later adopted as a Sith vessel thanks to Nihilus. Now, we get to the last of the Old Republic era ones. So these are the last of the early designs. And now we get to probably my favorite of these. The last of these, which properly earns the title of Star Destroyer, the Harrower class Dreadnought. This was the mainstay flagship of the Imperial fleet during the that whole 30-year stint after Revan disappears, or 30-40-year stint after Revan disappears for some time. Not 30, 40. It's 200 years he was kept imprisoned by the Sith Emperor, but these were the ones that were developed as the big hulking battleships of the Sith Empire.
Oh yeah, those ones. Yeah, I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah, these ones. I just sent you the
those
image.
Ones are dope.
This
I love
is
those.
Easily my favorite design of a Star Destroyer ever.
I like the forward
the hangar bay
launch
that's
base.
in the front.
Yeah.
The actual port where you deploy and enter in.
Yeah, that's the best part. I like that.
Yeah, this is originally built So the Harrower class dreadnought is it was a large dreadnought, approximately 800 feet in me. It was 800 meters long in length, 433 in width, and 151 in height. They actually give a approximate measurement on this one. It is 800 in length, 800 meters in length, 433 in width, 151 in height. It was also referred to as the Harrower class battle cruiser. And a little side note about this before I go any more into its technical standpoint is that this ship was actually the inspiration for this was one that when they revamped the Victory Star Destroyer with its new iteration. The new version of it was Palpatine referred to the Harrower class dreadnought of old in Legends, and they compared the two as they were the exact same size roughly, and they carried about the same armament capability. The Imperial Star Destroyer was basically the ramp up in this one. But this is the Harrower class dreadnought in of itself is roughly the size of a Victory Star Destroyer. So this one does also list its manufacturer in this one. That would be Tarab Starship Manufacturing. That is the producer of this little ship here. I say little, but it is easily the largest ship in that era until you start dealing with like Eternal Empire stuff, but we're not even going to touch that. So overall, measurements are given. The ship does obviously have a shielding setup. Actually comes equipped with 4 shield generators to it. It has an array of 4 shield generators to it. Comes with a heavily reinforced hull plating. And its actual armament comes to 32 plus turbo laser batteries, a large number of quad laser turrets, a large number of ion cannons, proton torpedo tubes, and concussion missile launchers. I would have to look at the old setup of it. I'd have to look at like images from the Starfighter mode and SOTOR, but they do have like all the hard points or stuff you can hit in the Starfighter mode on the Harrowers. And I want to say that there is probably the 32 plus turbo laser batteries is about right. I'd say there's probably an equal number of quad lasers. Ion cannons, I think there is probably only 6 aboard that thing. Same goes for the proton torpedoes and concussion missile launchers, all of which I think are side-mounted setups. The complement of this thing, which is stored across, you know how you mentioned the the docking ports on the front, docking bays on the front. There is a grand slam total of 5 total docking bays on this thing.
Wait, hold on. How many?
There is a grand total of 5 total docking bays where you can put ships and large craft in.
Hell yeah.
And considering its fighter complement, which we are about to get into, that makes sense. 95 starfighters, which mainly list the Mark VI Supremacy class starfighters, as well as 32 B-28 Extinction class bombers, and over 35 shuttles able to move transports and able to move troops across the stars and 2 planets. And it is capable. This one, I have not mentioned much of the crew capabilities on these, because most of these are kind of small numbers until we get to the bigger ships. The crew complement on this thing is 2,400 crew, and its passenger capacity numbers out to 7,300 troops. It is capable of holding almost 10,000 men, crew, and passengers combined. A large number of that crew is probably security and maintenance. I do not think there is as many menial groups on that ship. There is a probably large number of that relegated to droids, or seeing as it's the Sith Empire, slaves.
But it's a big, big ship, and that's what's the cool part.
It is a cool, badass ship that, again, was technically the one that would be recognized as a Star Destroyer proper. It actually has a few variants to it. I will mention some of the more notable ones. So there is the Valor Prevalis type. This variant had its frontal hangar bays in a diagonal inset, and the frontal prongs were angled slightly inward, so their tips almost met. The only vessel of this type is the Valor Prevalis. The next one of note on this is the BSX-5 Dreadnought. This was a smaller Harrower class ship that most infamously was utilized by. It carried a reduced armament and complement, and its most notable version of this was the flagship of the Sith Lord Darth Jadis, the Dominator.
How come the Sith have such cool ship names?
Because the Sith are edgy bastards, and edgy bastards get all the cool names.
Thank you. You know what? That's fair. That's incredibly true.
There's a reason Angel names everything the way he does.
Oh man, you got to bring him this too. That's fucked.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw him in this. I'm gonna throw him under the bus. I don't care. The next up, which is another one of the cool ones, is the silencer type. So these were basically the super weapon ships, the fleet killers that were featured in the Sith Inquisitor story. These were the ones that you earned towards the end. Its first actual test of this was just before just before you go to Corellia to actually fight Darth Thanaton. Actually have the big duel with Thanaton in his power base. The first ship of this type was the Doombringer. And more would also see,
name.
and more would in fact see construction, thanks to the sponsoring of the Sith Inquisitor's character Darth Nox. This was actually a very powerful. The ship itself was actually powerful enough. It was not only a fleet killer, it had the capability to shoot ships in hyperspace.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That breaks some sort of Geneva Convention, I'm sure.
Oh no, actually no. I apologize. That is the next one that we're going to get to, which is the Gauntlet type. It's basically a variant of the Silencer, but this is the one that has a hyperspace cannon.
That's gotta break some kind of intergalactic law.
Well, it wouldn't see much use anyway, because the only example of this ship was destroyed in the Troopers storyline. This was destroyed by Havoc Squad during the Republic Troopers storyline. So the Gauntlet type would never actually see wider use, unlike its sister ship, the Silencer. Unlike its sister variant, the Silencer, it would never see larger use in the war to come.
Ugh, shame.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, because The silencer itself is probably one of the only. I'll be honest. The silencer is probably one of the only reasons I liked the Inquisitor storyline. Like the storyline for the Inquisitor, for the Sith Inquisitor and SOTOR, was never one I cared for. It felt like one where I didn't have a lot of the freedom in the narrative represented. But well, if we ever actually sit down and do a playthrough of that at some point, I'm sure we'll be able to discuss that more. I figured that'd be a interesting playthrough.
Yeah.
So that is the last of the ones that come up as the pre-Clone Wars Star Destroyers. What comes up next is we're gonna start with one of the smaller variations of the early variations of Star Destroyers. And while it does not initially appear on the list, it is regarded wide and far that it is actually noted as a Clone Wars developed ship, that the Acclimator class assault ship, which was one we talked about a bit in the Commandos episode, is one of the primest examples of like the early Star Destroyer line.
Yeah. The true Dorito shapes.
And this ship right here is probably where you can trace a lot of the designs that the Republic and the Empire would use throughout their runs, throughout the Republic's time during the Clone Wars and the Empire's time after. But this was obviously their big like assault transport. The Acclimator class was its actual manufacturer is one that actually produces most of the Republic's armor. That would be Rathana Heavy Engineering, most notably recognized for developing um, the armored. What's it? The all-terrain tactical enforcer, the ATTE.
Yeah.
A lot of the heavy walkers that the Republic would field, well, the walkers in general, actually, were originally produced by Rathana Heavy Engineering, which fit especially considering Rathana is right over there considering Rathana is a few systems away from Camino, so it only feels right. And I think in the first place, Rathana had a lot of deals with the Republic prior for ships, for their like judiciary forces and everything. So it was kind of just a deal was kind of just a preset deal. But this was the Republic's capital ship before they would develop the Venator, which we will get to later. The Acclimator was their answer to a mass army transport, as well as a fleet, as well as a ship that could battle it out in a fleet. While not really succeeding a lot in that prior role, well, it succeeded more in its prior role of being a massive troop transport, basically moving an entire army on board. This was definitely not at least in its early iterations, not a combat-ready craft. This ship was not. Its overall length is 752 meters, which, hilariously enough, is actually just about what the Harrower class is in terms of length. Its dimensions actually closely match it somewhat, but with the length of the ship, it is 752 meters. The width is 460. The height and depth of it measure out to 183 standard, but with its landing gear deployed, because this was actually because the other reason this was a really useful army mover is because for being as big a ship it was one of the few that actually had the ability to actually land in atmosphere. It actually had the capability to land on planets. A lot of the Republic craft were actually capable of doing this, surprisingly enough. But with its landing gear, it would measure out to about 200 meters in height. It actually does. It also does measure its acceleration, its mobility stats as well, which is cool. I think this is actually the first one that shows that. Its max acceleration is listed to mark 3,500 Gs.
What?
Yeah, that is the amount of force this thing can accelerate to.
That is insane. Turn yourself to paste.
Yeah, that's why that's why Star Wars ships don't work on actual physics. This is the other. That's why Star Wars ships are cool, because they don't actually follow the laws of physics.
It's true.
They're one of the few sci-fis that break physics when it comes to their craft. I would say 40K, but 40K does enough reality bending that I can't really use the.
Okay, so Star Wars breaks it because they're just like, yeah, fuck it, sure, why not? It sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Warhammer breaks it, and they just go, yeah, but that's warp shit. That's explained. Get the fuck out of here.
It also lists its atmospheric. It also has a speed with an atmosphere that it can achieve. Its maximum atmospheric speed measures out to 1,200 kilometers an hour.
Hold up. 1,200?
Yep, 1,200 kilometers an hour, which, if you transfer that to American numbers and miles, that thing is in atmosphere is moving roughly 745 miles an hour. If you measure it out by, if you convert that, it is roughly 745 miles an hour.
What a bitch. Can't even hit supersonic.
To be fair, it's a big craft. It's not going to be able to do that.
Imagine being in the future. You can't break the sound barrier.
With your big fucking boat.
Yeah.
You're effectively a freighter. You're effectively
Cowards.
super freighter. You're incapable of breaking the sound barrier with your massive aircraft carrier.
Cowards can't even hit Mach 1. What's the point?
It does also list the hyperdrive range that this thing can actually go out to. The hyperdrive range that this thing has the capability to reach out to is while fully fueled, 2,500 light years. That is the range that this thing can move with its hyperdrive.
Once you start getting into light years, those numbers are too big.
Numbers are large. The power output on this thing is even measured, which is wild to me. I won't go into that because I'm not going to bog down that number. The ship's armament column, which is where it will really start to really show some of its capabilities. So the ship itself has 12 quad turbo laser turrets. Has 24 point defense light laser cannons. Has 4 heavy missile torpedo launchers with the capability of storing 100 high yield proton torpedoes and 20 assault concussion missiles to each one. The crew capacity on this thing is 700. So compared to other bigger ships, this one is actually much easier to crew. But the fact that this serves as a massive, basically carrier, that makes sense that the crew is going to be less than something like the Harrower, which is basically basically at the time its own dreadnought and was basically its own capital class. Its passenger capability numbered out to about 16,000 clones and support personnel. It was capable of holding up to 16,000 people as a passenger capacity. That's carrying roughly 8 platoons worth of clones.
That is many clones.
It is an entire legion. It is roughly an entire legion stored on that one ship. And that's just the clones, because it does have its own cargo capacity that it has. The craft that this thing can field numbers 320 speeder bikes, 80 lat gunships of both the 80 lat gunships, 66 of the lat I and 14 of the lat C, 48 ATTEs, 36 are self-propelled heavy artillery, and still having the extra capacity to hold 11,250 tons.
That's a bit nutty.
Yeah, this thing was wild. This one does not serve as big a role later in the war. During its time during the Empire, it would also be relegated to a outer rim patrol craft. It was basically relegated to a support craft role or being utilized exclusively for outer rim patrol. It served no other purpose other than being it was relegated to the sidelines by the time the Empire fully took to power. Because what use do you have for moving an army when your entire army can be moved on a freaking Star Destroyer?
True. Just
Or
shuttle them down where they need to go.
Or alternatively, if you don't have the Star Destroyer on hand, then you can rely on its good old fashioned predecessor, the Venator, the best of the Republic craft.
Yeah.
And this would actually be the first of the Star Destroyers that would be fielded under the Kuat drive yards. This craft right here officially starts the Republic and later the Empire's longtime partnership of building Star Destroyers. This ship alone is the reason Kuat Drive Yards becomes as infamous as it does for shipcraft. Because this one's success would be what they would take to the later Star Destroyers. Because when the Republic needed their own capital ship, as the war started picking up, the Venator came to play as one, a very, very suitable battle carrier, but also probably one of the biggest ships in the field at that time. Obviously, the Lucre Hulk exists, but I'm not going to touch the Lucre Hulk yet. We'll get to that on its own. That is probably going to end up being under the Super Dreadnoughts because that thing. Oof. Fucking Doom Donuts. So the Venator itself, I don't think needs much explaining on its history. It's mainly recognized through the movies, through Episode 3 and all of the Clone War series. The length of the ship measures out to 1,137 meters, width of 548. Height is 268 in flight. acceleration on this one is also measured both in atmo, both with its top speed in atmo and with its max acceleration overall. It is significantly less max acceleration than the acclimator, believe it or not. It is 3,000 Gs is what you're looking at for overall specifications on that.
Well, yeah, isn't it because it's bigger?
It is bigger, but it's also got a larger thruster setup than the acclimator does.
Huh.
Because it has its primary engine setup is 4 aft mounted, 2 port, and 2 starboard. It has an array of secondary drives mounted up with 2 aft, 1 port, 1 starboard, as well as a set of tertiary drive engines, 4 mounted aft and 2 port, 2 starboard. It has a larger number, and it's even wilder because this thing has a higher maximum atmospheric speed. Well, technically not. It does have a smaller atmospheric speed. But that one makes a bit more sense, being that this one was primarily meant to serve, while being a actual like while being a proper like battle carrier. This was primarily to serve the role of ship-to-ship combat for the Galactic Republic's army. Grand Army of the Republic was supposed to field this thing primarily as a ship-to-ship vessel. With a wide range of transport capacity, this thing basically was a crazy super ship. This thing was probably the best ship that the Republic fielded at that time, not counting their super ships. The max speed on this thing is 975 kilometers an hour, which is less, but in the case of atmospherics, it makes more sense. In miles, that numbers out to 605 roughly. You're doing 605 miles with that thing, so it is not as big a number. Now I gotta really start looking over all the power stuff. The biggest thing on the weapons on this one are the armament setup to this one. You have an array of 8 DBY dual DBY 827 heavy turbo laser turrets, 2 medium dual turbo laser cannons, 52 to 56 point defense laser cannons, 6 tractor beam projectors, 4 heavy proton torpedo tubes, able to hold 16 torpedoes each, plus a total number of 6 deck guns. And in some rare cases, these things also carried a spat cannon.
A what cannon?
A spat cannon. SHPA turbo laser. Self-propelled heavy artillery turbo laser.
Dope.
Which, if you are aware of what that actually would have looked like, it's the big beam cannon that they fire out from under the ship, from the central hangar bay.
Okay, that one. Okay.
Yeah, that is what that cannon is. That's the spat cannon.
They could have come up with a better name.
Probably, but then again, this was also utilizing a weapons array that was part of their early artillery cannons. They do come up with a wide number of starfighter complements. No official numbers on some of these. Well, they have some numbers, but they don't have a complete number. They do actually have design intent versus what the other stuff would have had. So originally, the ship had a design intent. Its carrier capacity with a design intent to carry A6 interceptors, the ARC 170 starfighters, the PTB 625 planetary bombers, and the NTB 630 naval bombers, which were basically just heavier specialized versions of the Y-wing. Its general complement consisted of roughly 192 Alpha 3 Nimbus class V-wings or V-19 Torrent starfighters, roughly 36 Arc 170 starfighters, and about 192 ETA-2 Actis class interceptors. The vessels were also known to carry the Y-wing bomber, the clone Z-95 headhunters, and the Jedi's Delta 7B Aether Sprite starfighter. Was also most infamously for acting alongside the Acclamator's role as a fleet carrier. This thing was capable of moving around, well, as an army carrier, not a fleet carrier. It was an army carrier. It had the additional asset capacity of loading 20 to 40 LAT gunships, 24 heavy military walkers, various shuttles and support craft, as well as at least one prefabricated garrison base. And its total crew capacity was 7,400 crew were required to fully crew this thing. Most of that probably being engineers and security. Passenger capacity only numbers to about 2,000 in comparison. The cargo capacity on this thing is actually roughly about, if not a little over the capacity of what the Acclamator could do. This thing's total cargo capacity was listed at being like 20,000 tons.
Big boy.
Yeah. Aside from the Venator, which is another one of the big, here's an infamous one from the series and whatever. Now we get to one of the now we get to one of the ones that people would not immediately recognize unless they play the video games or read the comics or novels. That would be the Victory class star. That would be the Victory class Star Destroyer.
That one sounds familiar.
You would probably recognize this one if you played Empire at War at all. This is the medium-sized Star Destroyer that you'd use as the Empire in Empire at War. I will actually pull up the image, which actually comes from share the image with you, which actually comes from Empire at War, believe it or not. So this right here is the Victory Star Destroyer. Now, I'm going to summarize the two classes of these, and I'm going to kind of gloss over the specs on these, because I'm probably going to eat more time up just going over system specs of all these Star Destroyers than I would just talking about them in general.
Yeah. So,
the Victory class Star Destroyer itself, for one, has two different variants to it. The Victory class Star Destroyer and the Victory 2. The Victory 1, which was commonly referred to in its early state, was originally developed during the Clone Wars. This was the Republic's furthering answer to needing heavier battleships. They were being able to overwhelm their force, and their deals with the Kuat drive yards were starting to come up more, and the push for new ships was required. And that's where the Victory comes about. It was developed during the middle of the Clone Wars and would see a lot of use during the end of the Clone Wars and throughout the rise of the Empire onward. As this was actually this was actually the last of the Star Destroyer line with the capability to actually land on the planet. The Victory 1 also had a separate role of being basically a missile boat. So the original designs of the Victory 1 featured a array of, so you see look at the image there. You see the like off plate on the side there, like big jutting out bit,
Yes.
where it kind of like where it kind of looks like it clamps together almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks like that because those are supposed to open up, and that's where an array of concussion missile launchers are set up.
Oh, dope.
That entire line was capable of firing off a array of I think it's 8 total concussion missile launchers. 4 ones to each side. That entire array was capable of doing that. It would open up, reveal the missile launchers, and from there you would use them in a more anti-cruiser role, complement with some like Venators or whatever. This was again, it was supposed to serve as a ship-to-ship with ground support capability. The biggest thing that differs from this to later Star Destroyers, again, is this is the only one that actually features a proper like artillery arrangement with the concussion missile launchers on its broadsides. Being able to just full salvo an array of missile launchers was huge. There were not many. There were many smaller craft that had these capabilities, but to have that level of firepower on a larger ship was devastating. And for a ship its size, this thing was roughly as big as the Acclimator. To put it in perspective, this thing was roughly as big as the Harrower. It was bigger than the Harrower by only about 100 meters, but it was just double the size of an Acclimator and carried more firepower than what the Venator could put out.
Nice.
It would receive a upgraded version later in its running. This would not come up until later in the Clone Wars, pretty much towards the end. The Victory 2 class Star Destroyer would serve its role primarily as much like the Acclimator, a support frigate and outer rim patrol cruiser. This was the differences between the Victory 1 and 2 are minor to a lot of degrees. The biggest one being that they removed the missile array in favor of a larger turbo laser and ion cannon array. They gave it more cannons. They gave it an array of more actual like turbo lasers and ion cannons rather than stacking it up with an array of missile launchers to serve as basically a glorified artillery ship.
Yeah. Put more close range guns on. Make it a skirmish.
And that was more or less what its role would serve as the Victory 2, like I said, was primarily a battle. It was primarily a cruiser that was used. And this one was also, this one actually has a dual producer. So this one is not just Kuat Drive Yards who manufactures this one. This was in partnership with Rendili Star Drive. Rendili doesn't have a lot that we've mentioned they've done throughout this, but they've got their own array of ships that they have developed, and we'll probably get to a few of them here in a bit. But the Victory's Star Destroyer did not serve a lot of big roles. It would basically come to replace the Acclamator in later years, was its biggest thing. This was the ship intended to replace the Acclamator as a heavy frigate and would come in to basically serve as a big super cruiser for basically a super frigate for the Republic and later the Empire. Obviously would never serve its big role in the Empire, but well, it would see service throughout the Empire, but would never really be huge. At least not until Thrawn comes around, but we get to Thrawn when we get to him.
Yeah. My beautiful blue boy.
That's pretty much the Victory Star Destroyers, and there's only one other. There's only one other pre-Clone Wars ship, really. There's two technically, but I'm not gonna count. I'm not gonna count these two as part of it. So the only other one that actually comes into the collection of Clone Wars era Star Destroyers is the Providence class carrier destroyer. The Providence class carrier destroyer, which most notably is recognized as the flagship of General Grievous towards the end of the war. This is probably one of my favorite separatist ships that have ever come out of Star Wars. It's never officially classed that, but it would come with the identifier of the separatist Star Destroyer, essentially.
Well, a Star Destroyer is just a destroyer class ship. That's how it originally came out. Was a destroyer type ship that was amongst the stars.
Yeah,
Like that was how George Lucas described it.
There is some in there is some in-universe terminology for it, but some in-universe logic to where that comes about. But
The way I see it is it a big ship? It's
yep,
probably a Star Destroyer.
yeah. If it's 600 meters or more, it's probably a Star Destroyer. But that is the last of the ones that come up as Clone Wars era ones. And now we can jump into the Imperial era, where there is a fair bit. We go into the post Clone Wars era. So, obviously, I'm going to touch on this one first, as it's easily the most recognized. We're going to go ahead and get into the Imperial class 1 and 2 Star Destroyers, which does have its own predecessor iteration, the Imperator. The Imperator was obviously its prototype build. It would later get upgraded and renamed the Imperial class. These were created early in the Clone Wars, but they were not officially utilized until far later. There are not a lot of differences in overall design between the Imp 1 and 2. The only real notable differences are the only real on first glance differences are the fact that the Imperial one has the crazy bridge tower thing going on the top, and the Imperial 2 does not. Its bridge tower, the antenna array on the bridge tower is not as tall. It is instead flattened out and wider, so it is not as easy a target to hit by small craft. At least that's what they thought.
Foreshadowing is a literary device.
So obviously, a lot of these ships that came out under the Empire were initially under the idea of the Tarkin Doctrine. Under the Empire, there were a number of these ships that came out, but there were also a couple ships that did not initially come out during this time. I'll get to some of the ones that come up later, but I'm going to focus a lot on the early one, on more Empire ones, because there's a lot more in the Empire's lineup than there are what else comes up. So, obviously, the Imperial 1, Imperial 2, Imperial 1 class Star Destroyer. It has the glorious, glorious, glorious length of 1,600 meters is its total. Is 1,600 meters as a total length with a very hefty armament complement. Obviously, this is a ship that needs little to no introduction, as this is the prime example of the Death Dorito.
Death Dorito Prime.
Death Dorito Prime. These were, of course, as mentioned, these were, of course, developed originally during the start of the Clone Wars, but they would never see wider use until the end of it, and when it would come up later, the Tector class Star Destroyer, which, in difference to the Imperator, was more or less a battleship. So all the Star Destroyers up to this point have had the capability of fielding fighters, being a massive cruiser with a lot of big guns on it. The Tector does away with one of those things, mostly the former, as it trades off its entire hangar capacity. It does not carry any fighters to it, and instead utilizes a much wider and heavier array of turbo lasers, ion cannons, and concussion missiles. It sacrifices all its carrier capacity to basically turn itself out into basically a heavy brawler. Like, you throw this thing up to the line with other Star Destroyers, they're pumping out fighters. The Tector is the one laying down all the firepower. As it also sports a much heavier armor capacity as well. Which is another attribute of the Tector. It carries a much heavier armor capacity. It has a much wider has a much wider array of armaments to it, and does not carry fighters. That is the biggest trade-offs between the two. Obviously, not gonna go in much on the Imperial 1, as it is the one most recognized throughout all of Star Wars. We'll go into its differences with the Imperial 2, though. So the differences that come up were the replacement of the tractor beam targeting array between the command tower sensors, which obviously I stated was their big, like, here's the big target to free your ships from what we're bringing in. Have fun, bring it down. You can't bring it down. It's clearly too obvious for you to hurt it.
Don't target our huge glowing weak points.
Don't target our huge glowing weak points. But the other part of it, aside from that, it also did away with with its point defense weaponry. Don't think that served them much better.
Probably not the best thing.
Probably not the best idea, given that the rebels' tactics does not save that ship at all. The rebels' tactics of using fighters and fast-moving corvettes would probably be this thing's glaring weakness. as in opposition against Starfighter, as an opposition against the Rebel Alliance. This thing would basically take a lot of the attributes that the Tector Star Destroyer had, where it had a heavier hull reinforcement, stronger shields, greater firepower. It did still keep its fighter complement, though the biggest issue here is the biggest issue, of course, being they got rid of their tractor beam array.
Mistake.
And they removed their point defense weaponry. Also a mistake.
I would say that is probably a bigger mistake.
Yeah. Not a smart
we're gonna
decision.
be fighting a bunch of fighters and small corvettes and shit. Let's get rid of the weapons that take care of those.
Yeah, it's not the greatest. That's pretty much the only real differences between the two. Otherwise, the setups are more or less the same. Aside from the fact it's got a heavy armament capacity, and this would be the one that sees more wide use later on. But we will get into the next one that I want to touch on, the Gladiator class. We'll provide the image of this one because this is actually one of my. This one is probably one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, this one's dope.
It's like a pocket harrower.
Yeah, I like it.
This one does. This one has seen some bits in the. This one has seen some bits in comics and stuff. This one, however, would not originally see any use until this one would not see any use until pretty much after. This thing would actually be a pretty big like carrier brawler frigate that the Empire would utilize as a support craft for its Star Destroyers. Like I said, it shows up in some of the comics and books, but its first real like here's the live instance of this thing was during the Force Unleashed 2 game.
I will say that is one of the games I didn't play, and that is only because it crashed my computer every time I tried to.
Yeah. Supposedly there's some weird fix to get that to work, but it apparently involves something with uh trying to play around with firewalls and stuff, and I'm not about to play around with that.
Too much work.
Too much effort to play the game. I instead watch playthrough.
Why game not just go? Why
Why
game
game
not
no
just work?
Why game no go? But yeah, this one was actually probably one of the better examples of a carrier, and in my opinion, probably one of the best frigates that the Empire had to their disposal. This is one I will actually give some like credence to its armament and complement capacity. Because this one serves as I mentioned how the ships for the Empire, like the Victory and the Acclimator, serve as basically border patrol and support craft. This is probably the best example of this. The Gladiator's main weapon complement is 12 light dual turbo lasers, 10 point defense medium laser cannon turrets, uh, and 10 proton torpedo or assault concussion missile launchers, and 8 medium tractor beam projectors. This was basically the ultimate answer to border security in the Empire. Like this right here was probably the best example of a support craft and a proper like outer rim patrol vessel. And that's not to even say about what it holds on the complement of fighters and everything. In total, this thing had the capability of holding 24 starfighters, unspecified. It just has the flat capacity of 24 fighters.
Nice.
And the other part of it, and it's also capable of holding a numerous amount of shuttles, landing craft, and utility vehicles. The only one that actually states alongside the shuttles and everything is that it has the capacity of 5 ATSTs able to be stored in this thing. There's a capacity for 5 ATST walkers. So at minimum, you can throw in 1 AT-AT in there. You have the cargo capacity for at least 1 AT-AT in there.
I mean, that's still pretty cool.
And given that this is definitely one of the coolest of them because it's just a really cool ship. I don't think there's much else I can say other than that. It really is just overall a cool vessel.
Yeah, it's dope.
It really just kind of complements all the factors that it should.
Honestly, they should have just upscaled this for bigger Star Destroyers.
Honestly, though, big scaled fucking Gladiator would be dope, but no. No, we just make bigger Death Dorito. Damn it. Not salty.
Not a little. Completely unsalted.
So another one of these that personally doesn't come up as a favorite of mine is the Precursor. The Precursor Star Destroyer was another line of heavy frigate, essentially. These were basically their light warships, essentially. To my knowledge, these don't serve much. These don't have many visual instances of being used outside of. I think it really only shows up in the Empire at War video games, and that's only through the mods.
Yeah.
And outside of that, it only, to my knowledge, comes up. Yeah, no, it only comes up in the card game, and comes up in the card game, the Essential Guide to Warfare, and the second and third book of Dark Empire. That is the only place this thing shows up. It's honestly just a mini Tector more than anything. It's a smaller Star Destroyer. It has some weapons arrays to it. It's not as cool, honestly. But that's another one on this list. I'm not gonna go over the Tector because I technically touched on it by touching through the Imperial class. I don't really need to go over it again. We're actually nearing the end of the list of Star Destroyers now. We're almost to the end.
Oh, we're getting to the really, really juicy ones now.
Yeah, because there's only one more proper Imperial. There's only like a few more Imperial Star Destroyers I have, and I'm gonna go into the last one, which is the smallest of them. Well, technically it's not the smallest, but this being the Interdictor class Star Destroyer. So this is basically an Imperial Star Destroyer. We slap some of the big massive gravity well balls onto the Imperial Star Destroyer frame.
Yeah, the anti-ship titties.
It's got
Stop everything
quad
from moving.
titties. It's got quadra titties. It basically beefed up the immobilizer cruiser's frame to basically be like a Star Destroyer. That's it, again. It's just here's the gravity well balls that we slapped on the immobilizer, and and we put it on a big Star Destroyer. We have scaled them. We slapped them on the sides of a big fucking Imperial Star Destroyer.
Leave it to the Empire to cut corners.
Yeah. Which is hilarious given the next two that I'm about to go over. So the next two that I'm about to touch on are the Saranin class the Saranin class Star Destroyer. So we're actually starting to touch on ones that don't have any precedence until the late, like post Endor period. These are the last of the ones for the Empire that really don't see any use until that point. And the only real instance of this is the Star Destroyer that was a Star Destroyer featured in excuse me. It was the Battle of Anx Minor. The Raquel was the actual name of the Saranin class that was fielded. This was during the Black Fleet crisis in Legends during the expanded era, and was really only featured there. It was unfortunately destroyed during the Battle of Anx Minor in 17 ABY, when the New Republic used a weak spot to breach the ship's antimatter containment. Originally, the Saranin class was basically just a test bed that was later captured by the Uvethans, who at that point were still serving as were still slaves to the Empire. But when the Black Fleet crisis breaks out, that's when they basically go out. That's when the Uvethans jump out from their homeworld, form the Discon League, and go out, start terrorizing the galaxy with a bunch of stolen Imperial toys. A wider note of this one is that the Saranin class Star Destroyer, while not being anywhere near the Super Star Destroyer class, was featured as one of the heavier ships that was utilized in the Thrawn's Revenge mod. When you play Zinja's Empire, it is basically their heavy capital ship that they get to utilize, which I think was cool, but meh. You do also get the Raquel in that mod as well after the Black Fleet crisis. Whoever actually defeats the Duskon League gets the Raquel. Is effectively how that one goes out. Is if you are the one who finishes off their force, you get the Raquel. The Saranin class is one. The Secutor is probably the last of the Imperial ones. At least until we get into stuff in Legacy, because I will actually touch on some of the Legacy era ones. But the Secutor is probably one of the last that we see used to any large capacity in this way. The Secutor is basically the weird, estranged love child of if you upscaled the Acclimator, flattened its frame out, and then slapped in the center of it the Venator's like twin command towers.
Okay. Yeah.
Give you the image of this one.
Yeah, that thing. I hated that thing.
This thing is dumb. It is actually dumb.
It's got so many guns though.
It has a fair amount of guns and just as much fucking starfighters. Because this thing is basically a heavy battle carrier. It has a lot of guns. 15 heavy and light turbo laser batteries. 15 battleship ion cannon batteries. 16 medium ion cannon batteries. And 12 tractor beam generators. With a full fighter complement capacity of 144 starfighters, multiple other craft, several walkers, and 14,000 troops.
Seems like a low amount of fighters.
Compared to most super capitals, yeah. This thing does not, for being a battle carrier, it serves this role. It serves this role as being able to spit out a bunch of fighters, but it carries as much fighter capacity. It carries as much firepower, so it doesn't have to play the full battle. It doesn't have to play a full like carrier role. It can serve as a battleship on top of that. It has enough weapons it can defend itself, but it doesn't have the full armament capacity. It doesn't have the full like fighter capacity to only rely on fighters, like say the Venator or Star Destroyers. Um, there is only one other of the Imperial ones that I can really mention, and it is really just a mention, and that is the Rejuvenator class Star Destroyer. This is one of the New Republic's. This is one of the New Republic Star Destroyers, and this is kind of where it branches into that. Um, it really doesn't have a lot going for it, other than it was mainly fielded during the last months of the war against the Yuzon Vong. Um, but getting into
Do you have an image of that one?
nope.
Damn.
No, there's not going to be many of these that are going to have an image for them, unfortunately. Many of the
The
rest of
Yuzon
these are not going
Vong
to have.
War needed more visual mediums.
Yeah, it did. Um, Another one that comes up that, while being an Imperial one, I don't initially count because it mostly comes up as an Imperial one for the Legacy era. And I'm probably going to touch on this one last because it is probably one of the two I'm going to touch on last. So, getting over the last few at this point, we have the Aggressor class Star Destroyer, which, again, if you've played Empire at War, you will immediately recognize this thing.
Oh yeah.
So this was actually a stolen design by the Zon Consortium, um, and was utilized to great effect under his rule as a warship capable of basically busting other warships.
Yep. Crack them
As
wide open.
this thing was basically an experimental weapon that featured a massive ion pulse cannon and a massive spiraling plasma cannon. This thing was quite literally, if you took the Mac cannon from Halo and put it in Star Wars. That is what this thing is. This
And
is
it's
the Mac
just as cool sound.
is just as cool. It's even cooler because I believe that this was actually taken for this was originally one the Empire were going to try to field, but Zahn stole the prototype vessel, and so they were never able to reproduce it. Tiber Zahn took the prototype of this vessel and utilized it to. He would even take the prototype and make it his flagship. His flagship being named the Merciless.
So imagine you're contracted to build a new ship
Yep.
and it gets stolen.
Yep.
And you don't have spare blueprints lying around.
Nope.
Because apparently the blueprints were also on the ship.
Hmm.
Idiots. All
Yeah.
of them.
Complete idiots. Fools. All of them.
We don't need copies. Who's going to take this ship? Wait, where's it going? Oh no.
That's a Star Wars segment if I've ever heard it. But the aggressor class is probably one of the many like smaller experimental standalones. The next one on this list is actually the Bakura class destroyer. Here is an image that I believe actually comes from the Essential Guide to Warfare.
Those remind Xeon ships from Mobile Suit Gundam.
Mm.
They're just
Um.
weird and bold to see look.
Yeah. So these were designed. Uh. These were designed by the Bakurian Defense Fleet and were used were established following the repulsion of the Siruk at the invasion of Bakura. Um, the Bakura class was actually one supposedly capable of being on the line of most big Star Destroyers, but due to its size, it's probably more in line with like the Victory and Acclimator being only 850 meters. What's weird about this one though, um, this ship actually has. This is probably the only example I've ever known of a ship like this. This ship actually has an anti-interdiction field. This
Well,
ship has the capability to ignore interdiction vessels.
I feel like more ships should have needed that.
Yeah, yeah, especially since Thrawn's main use of that. I want to talk about him, but I can't.
You can talk about him a little bit as a treat.
We can mention him. Yeah, the interdiction was probably his biggest like strategy, but that was mainly around his whole taking the rebels tactic of hit and run strategies and using that against them. And that was where the interdictors came in. That's where a lot of interdictor craft came in clutch, which is probably where the usage of that technology from the Bakura class Star Destroyer would be primarily useful for that. Um, Should also be noted a little bit that three of these destroyers actually participated in the Battle of Centerpoint Station in 18 ABY.
Oh, cool.
Um, so this is probably the second to last of the ones that come up before we get into the Legacy era, but we're also into I think the final four. So we're gonna talk about this one now, which is the Chiss Star Destroyer. This was a Star Destroyer that was mainly fielded by the Chiss during the. It was first observed during the conflict with the Killit colony in 35 ABY, so there's no real documented history of it prior. Um, so the Darkness Crisis is really where these would first come up. Um, But these were effectively the Chiss's own warship that I guess they were developing when the Vong War was still going on. There is unfortunately no image for this one. But the next one I have does have an image. And this one is the Nebula class Star Destroyer. This one does have its own image. Check it out.
Yeah, that one's cool. I like that one.
Yeah, this was one of the first warships that were developed in the New Republic's New Class Modernization program. So instead of the concept, a lot of the late Dark Empire era, especially like post Dark Empire, the New Republic and later the Galactic Alliance made a weird they made a weird emphasis on um, big power and small package.
Yeah.
As the Nebula Star Destroyer and even its sister ships, the Turbulent and Endurance, which does not get mentioned here, but I know it's one that exists somewhere. The Nebula class Star Destroyer was basically if you took the idea of the power that most ISDs had, pocket that into a more compact frame. These were in an effort to keep the military power that the New Republic would need in case of a new threat arising, especially in a very tumultuous time of here's another warlord popping up doing X thing. Here's another warlord popping up doing X thing. Uh-oh, this other group's coming out to do one thing. Up, suddenly we got another group coming out to do another thing. What's that? Another warlord's doing another thing.
Yeah, it gets a little wild.
It's one of the few. While it made the expanded universe interesting, I think it also makes it very hectic compared to Canon's storyline. But at least in this one, they didn't fully like do away with the military.
True.
In this case, they tried to be more conventional instead of making large super ships or whatever. Trying to make big fleet defenders or whatever. These were the answer to quick, cost-effective warships that could be produced within reasonable time and have the capability to brawl with heavy hitters like the ISD. Um, but that's what most of these ones are like. The Nebula, the Endurance, and the Turbulent are all like that. The last one that's really worth mentioning here, which is another of the Republic Star Destroyers, is the Republic. Is the Republic class Star Destroyer, and this one is. I like a lot of the modders designs of this one. I don't care for the actual canonical image of the. I don't care for the actual one that comes out of the Essential Guide to Warfare as much.
That looks awful.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. There is much better iterations of this that are shown in mods for in the modding for Empire War. They show a lot of the they show off much better versions of this same design of this ship's design. It sucks. It's in the first place, it's not even a good ship. Like I like the idea that the Republic needed its own Star Destroyer program. The New Republic needed its own warships and proper warships, not we got a bunch of fucking transports and converted them into warships.
Yeah.
We needed our own warship. Like this was their answer to that. Clearly they had to figure some things out before they got to shit like the Endurance or the Nebula.
It looks like someone's idea of what a sci-fi ship should look like. It's like, oh, it's just all round.
I like to think if the Mon Cala built a bird of prey.
That's exactly what it looks like. Now that I'm looking at it, yeah, it looks like a bird of prey. That shit
Which
sucks.
which is even worse when you think about the fact that this is not while it was While the organic shape was was influenced by Moncal shipyards, the actual manufacturer is the same people who produced the Victory Star Destroyer.
Awful.
Rendili Star Drive is the actual manufacturer of this ship. Clearly, this is not their best work. They hit the mark way better with the Victory, I think. But there's only two more to actually really bring up of note here. There are only two more ships left worth covering in this run. And these are exclusively Legacy era ships. So the first of these is the Imperius class Star Destroyer. And we'll share the image of this one before I go into it too deeply.
Well, it looks cool.
This was so in the Legacy era. This was their answer to. This was actually the ship that was most utilized originally by the Galactic Alliance, but um, would later go on to see use in it would actually go on to see a lot of use under Darth Krayt's empire. As this was the warship that was mainly fielded under his command. And then the last one that we will bring up for this little segment, as I wanted to bring up I wanted to bring these up, mostly because these are probably your first actual glimpse of like, here's some stuff from the Legacy era, because you have absolutely no idea what that is about. Um, so the last of these is the Paleon class Star Destroyer. The ship on the side is there as a size comparison, I think. But that is the Paleon class Star Destroyer, which unlike the unlike well, it was also utilized by Darth Krayt's Empire. It was also utilized by the Fel Empire. It was actually their big warship. The Paleon class was their big warship of that era. I'll probably get to talk more about these in individual parts when we actually start discussing the Legacy era proper.
Yeah.
But those are the last two on my list that were worth bringing up.
So, all right. So the last two look exactly the same, except for one has a Rebel Alliance markup.
Yeah, because the other one was originally built for the Galactic Alliance, which was the New Republic's reformed government during the Long War.
Oh.
But yeah, they made the Paleon class was also developed sometime after the Long War as a sort of memorial ship for the last of the Empire's warlords, that being Thrawn's captain, Gilad Paleon. Paleon was the Star Destroyer itself was actually developed in recognition of Paleon. That's why it is named after him, as he was one of the main warlords towards the end. But another reason they look so similar is really because they are.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Like, did the rebel did like the not the rebel line, the New Republic just like, yo, this ship was pretty dope. We're taking it.
Yeah, this.
You made this. I made this.
Yeah, so these were ones that fell under Darth. These were the original, like. These were Darth Crate's Star Destroyers, and a lot of them were. Like, these were originally used as part of the Galactic Alliance's fleet, but these were later mainly utilized when the Sith Empire basically ousted the Galactic Alliance. They took pretty much all of their military force, and so that's why a lot of their ships look the same, is because they quite literally were designed with similar patterns in mind. The Imperius's main difference, really is on it was. I think it's actually that it's larger. I think the Imperius is a larger frame than the Paleon class.
Okay. So they took it from the Galactic Alliance and we're just gonna make it bigger.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if it's bigger, it fits more guns, I guess.
Well, I mean, you also have to remember there wasn't a lot of big governments to oppose the Galactic Alliance aside from the Fel Empire. So when the Galactic Alliance was ousted, essentially, um, the Fel Empire was the only military force to stand against them. So
Gotcha.
they have a bunch of big ship. We go blow thing up now. So it we'll talk a lot more about that era. Um, we'll get to talk about the Legacy era, so that some of that makes more sense. But um, there's really not anything else on my list. That pretty much covers the scope of Star Destroyers.
Dope. Star Destroyers are cool.
Yeah, they're. I know I didn't go into a lot of detail on a lot of the later ones, but I was pressing time and wanted to get through all of them as quickly as possible. So I glanced over a lot of them, which originally was going to be my intent. A lot of them are. There's a number of these that actually deserve like their own dedicated bit. There's enough lore to some of these that they deserve their own dedicated piece to them. Because like I could do an entire video about like we could do an entire bit about the flagships of individual factions, and that's where a lot of these will come up.
All right, so this is more like a teaser for later.
Yeah. Speaking of teasers for later, seeing as there's not a lot else to really talk about, because there's not a lot else to go over as far as the Star Destroyers, um, and we're pretty much in the discussions of afterwards, anyways. Let's go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and give you the note. I pretty much have given you one of the biggest hint. I can give you one of the hints for what we'll be discussing next time, and that is the fact that it links so closely to what we've just discussed. Um, and the biggest thing is that the thing we are about to discuss is something commonly found aboard the Star Destroyers.
Is it fighter craft?
You are close you are in that vein.
All right, so TIE fighters.
We are indeed going to be going after the TIE fighters.
Yeah, the
And not
little
only
screech monsters. Yeah.
not only will we be talking about the TIE fighters, I'll go over the TIE Fighter models and all the ones that exist, but I will also be going over what I will also be going over the standards of training and the standards of training and practice that the Imperial Starfighter Corps would largely go through. As we are not just talking about we will not just go over TIE fighters. We will also be discussing the the Galactic Empire's Starfighter Corps.
Oh, that's so cool.
Because the week after that one is where we will actually get our first character bit.
Yeah.
And I will only drop the hint so that you can. I will only drop the hint of it now. What we discuss here is probably the entire link. Is probably the biggest hint I can give to who the character we're going to discuss will be. So you can figure it out before. You can figure it out, and we'll get to it. You'll probably be able to figure it out if you look through deep enough. But next week will be the TIE Fighters and Imperial Starfighter Corps.
Yeah. I love TIE fighters. They're so cool.
TIE Fighters are. We love our squints and eyeballs.
Yeah.
The fucking coffin jockeys are. The coffin jockeys serve a very dedicated purpose in the Empire.
I love my little TIE fighters. They just they can't tie ties. It's great.
They are definitely one of the more. I definitely think they're probably one of my favorites of the larger scope of starfighters. Because there's a couple like cool rebel ones, but the TIE Fighter has the widest range of starfighters that I love. That I like more than the Rebellion starfighters.
Yeah.
Plus, there's enough that I would be. Plus, there's enough that I can squeeze in the. What is it? It's really only like 3. There's only like 3 or 4 new iterations of TIE Fighter in canon. So I won't be going over the First Orders ones. I'm exclusively going over the ones that are. I'll exclusively go over the ones that are featured in the Galactic Empire's military. These are the proper TIE. These are the Imperial's TIE fighters, and it's the variations thereof, and the Starfighter Corps. It's gonna be an interesting episode because this will basically be like a dual feature where I'm covering where I'm covering like the Imperial Starfighter programs. I'll get to go into like the training the pilots got into and what their behaviors and like day-to-days were. But I'll also get to talk about the TIE fighters themselves, as you really can't talk about the Imperial pilots without discussing their fighter craft.
Correct.
So that is going to be next week's episode. Again, hopefully Jake's voice will be recovered by then. Otherwise, he's probably going to the hospital.
If it's not better by the end of this weekend, I'm going to the hospital.
Fair enough. Yeah, there's anything in particular about the discussion of Star Destroyers today that you've got as a note here?
Other than, I think they're all really cool.
Well, most of them.
Well, they're all cool, but they're not equally cool.
They're all cool, but there's an odd duck in there somewhere.
Somewhere, you look through them, and you'll be like, one of these things is not like.
Specifically, the Republic class Star Destroyer.
Yeah. Oh.
If it makes you feel any better, you're not the only one who has like hateful opinions towards this ship. your hatred of this thing's look is not unfounded. There's a reason that the ship got remodeled in the Thrawn's Revenge mod. There's a reason they remodeled that thing.
Yes, because it looks like dog shit.
Looks like ass. Thing is actually bad.
It's incredibly unfortunate the way it looks.
Yeah. It
But
clearly looks like here's a Mon Calamari ship, and we put it over the frame of a Star Destroyer.
yeah,
Yeah. But
not great.
um, aside from that, there's a lot of interesting Little Star. There's a lot of interesting ones out there, and I still stand by the fact that the Gladiator is the best one that the Empire has ever produced, and the Harrower is just the best one in general.
Yeah, both in looks and what they can do. Again, they should
Hmm.
have just upscaled them.
Yeah, it really should have, but eh. I mean, there's still a bunch of other cool ones that exist, but that pretty much covers everything, and I think that is going to be where we'll call it. As we're pretty much we actually made it to that basically 2 hour mark. We didn't actually jump over that one this time.
Nice.
So I'm gonna go ahead and let you rest your voice, and hopefully you are better tomorrow. And I'm probably going to go ahead and go do some gaming and finishing up whatever cleaning I've got to do today. So
Nice.
I thank you all so much for watching.
Yep.
Come in. There will not be a stream Tuesday. At least of what I remember planning, I don't have. Okay, I do have one Tuesday. Tuesday we will be doing a new series with Colin Beans. We're gonna be playing 7 days with them. And Wednesday I will be officially finishing Bolt Gun.
About time.
I want it to be done. That final level put some hurt on me, but we've discussed that one enough on the side.
Yep.
Um,
I
but
believe I
I'm
believe it came down to skill issue.
skill issue until you experience it yourself. In which case, you are not sorry, but I understand.
Correct.
um, so yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. Streams will start up again. Stream schedule will resume proper next week with 7 days, Colin Beans, Tuesday. So hope you all have a good weekend and enjoy the rest of your day. This has been the Freelancer here with Jake, signing off until next time. Good night, everybody.
Bye bye.